Yeah.
Give us your assessment.
I was glad that he finally apologized for these events. The president's apology yesterday was indirect through the King of Jordan. Secretary Rumsfeld's apology was more direct, and I think we should welcome that. It's overdue. A couple of things he said troubled me. Near the end, when he said that he can't imagine that anybody who saw these photos would believe that anybody could have approved or encouraged that kind of conduct. As a matter of fact, the Takuba report finds exactly that the conduct was not only improved, but was encouraged by the military intelligence. And that the police, the military police, the MPs, were implementing what they understood to be the direction and request and desire of the intelligence people who were trying to gain information from these detainees and from these prisoners by means of the kind of humiliating behavior that we see in these pictures. So the fact that the Secretary of Defense can't imagine that anybody could have approved this runs smack into the Takuba report, and it seems to me it's totally contrary to the pictures themselves, which show quite clearly to me that this was a methodical effort to gain information from prisoners, and was in all likelihood in order to extract information from them. And finally, on the question of whether or not the Geneva Conventions apply, today he flat out said the Geneva Conventions apply, except for al-Qaeda people. But to everybody in the prison, other than those few people, if any, the Geneva Conventions apply. What he said recently is that the Geneva Conventions do not apply precisely, that something different or something less than, presumably the Geneva Conventions apply. He has said that people would be treated as though the Geneva Convention did apply. That's a distinction which has been made previously, which was not made today. I think that is a change in their position. It is a welcome change in their position, but it should be noted that it is a change in their position.
Are you concerned, Senator, that these activities are not limited just to this prison, that it could be more widespread in the country?
We don't have evidence that this type of activity applied, but clearly abusive activities have been alleged in a number of prisons. But this type of activity, it has not been alleged to have occurred in other places. But as he pointed out, what we have seen so far is going to just be apparently the beginning of evidence of this type of activity.
Senator, do you think...
If I thought it would, his resignation would change the policies of this administration relative to Iraq, I'd be all for it. The kind of failures, the kind of mismanagement which have characterized the waging of this war, it seems to me have called for changes a long time ago. But I don't see that his resignation would change the policies of this administration, the mismanagement that has resulted from those policies. And from that perspective, I don't think it would result in a change. In terms of whether or not it would be appropriate relative to the specific circumstances of these prisoner abuses, I want to consider other information, and I want to think about that longer before I conclude whether or not that would make a difference or not. Because one of the issues here is whether, if there were a change at the top, who would take his place. If it would be his deputy, I don't see that that would represent a change at all in terms of the direction we should go. But secondly, there's hopefully going to be a transfer of sovereignty on June 30th. And it's very difficult already for that change to take place. It's very problematical that it can succeed. But I wouldn't want to see anything happen which would make it more difficult for that transfer of sovereignty or assumption of sovereignty by an Iraqi entity yet to be determined to occur. So I'd want to weigh that factor as well.
What's your
was last Wednesday's failure to disclose to the committees that the 60 Minutes program was coming on that night? Was that part of a pattern of non-disclosure over the last 3 years, or was this a major exception? deception?
I think the administration's been secretive generally when it comes to information coming to Congress or to the public. This is part of that pattern, clearly.
What do you make of the criticism that's voiced, particularly in Europe and The Economist today, that there's just been a general pattern set of disregard for detainees' rights, starting with the sort of Guantanamo, setting up the camp in Guantanamo so it's outside lots of laws? What do you make of that case?
It's a legitimate criticism. I think it's some of it has already been presented to the Supreme Court, and I think the criticism is legitimate. They've changed the situation in Guantanamo, but the way it started out, the way the president right off the bat called the Geneva Convention's legalisms, it seems to me set the wrong tone.
Do you think that this will add to or decrease the momentum that was building for Secretary to resign?
I don't know. The fact that he at least directly apologized was important. On the other hand, his near the end, his unwillingness to believe that these actions could have been encouraged troubles me and maybe troubles others, because he's got to judge ultimately whether or not these actions were encouraged, suggested, prompted by military intelligence. I think the evidence is very strong that they were, and the Takuba report has direct evidence that these actions were encouraged, incited, in order to gather information for the military intelligence people. So if he's unable to believe that, that does not put him in a very objective position to judge evidence that's already in the Takuba report that is exactly what happened. Yeah.
Senator Graham said that they suggested that the video shows instances of rape and murder. Have the members of the Senate been briefed on the contents of this video that Secretary Rumsfeld referred to? Have you been briefed on the additional photographs that have not been disclosed?
I have not.
Do you know anything about whether or not the video itself depicts?
Do not. My staff, I hope, is behind here. Perhaps they have been, and if they have, they should tap me on the shoulder and say they have been, but I have not been.
You think the people who did the abuse were following orders?
I think the people who carried out these abuses were doing what the military intelligence folks suggested or prompted be done in order to, quote, soften up prisoners for intelligence purposes. That, I think there's evidence of it, and I think that is what has likely happened here. These did not look like, based on the evidence of the Takuba report or from these photographs, spontaneous actions that were just aberrations of individuals. These looked like they were methodical, organized, because you have people in these pictures in the room who are assisting the folks who are humiliating the prisoners. You have other people who are very casually standing by. The pictures themselves show the methodical nature of this activity. And yes, I think it is very likely that these actions were prompted, suggested by the intelligence people to be carried out by MPs in order to soften up witnesses so that they would provide information. I can't tell you that if I were sitting on a jury I could reach that conclusion beyond a reasonable doubt, but there sure is a lot of evidence from both the Takuba report and the pictures themselves when you study the people that are in these rooms.
At one point, Secretary Rumsfeld was asked if these other pictures and videos come out, would he have to resign? He said it's possible. Do you think those disclosures would make his position untenable?
I don't know what's in them, and as to whether or not
he said there